Wesker Ma, how are doing you? Keert Mila Falcha to the channel. Hello and welcome to the Albanach Knitter. My name is Andrew and I am the Albanach Knitter, and it's great to welcome you back to what is episode 13, and great to be back with you today. I think I've broken the internet because you may have noticed I'm wearing a different shirt. I hope that's not too much for you to try and come to terms with. But there we go. Well, it's been a good time for me since the last time I sat down and had a chat. I've been away on my holidays to beautiful Argyll and had a chance to visit the wonderful Isle of Iona. In the midst of all that, there's been plenty of knitting. So there's finished projects, works in progress, plans for the future, updates on the Big Charity Beanie-Along, and news of a knit-along for the autumn-winter months as well, which I've spoken to you about before. So plenty to get on with, so let's get on with it. Now, as you see, I'm still sitting in my normal spot, and those of you who are long-term watchers of the channel will know that this scene in particular is going to be reasonably limited because we are officially moving house in the next few months. We're due to complete on a new house in Brodick, which is one of our villages on the Isle of Iona here, where I'm based, and we expect that we'll be able to be into that house well into the autumn. But here I am coming to you with a little bit of an introduction to the knitting, and there has been this time some finished objects. Would you actually believe it? Now, I think last time I was on the video, I was finishing off the anchor sweater, the child's version of the anchor sweater, from about age 1 up to age 2, I think the size I chose. And I was knitting it with some wool, which I had got to complete my dusting sweater, but it was the wrong shade. And so, of course, I had to use the wool. And I'm really pleased with this little project. And the colour won't quite come out the same, but there we go. Isn't that cute? Isn't that absolutely cute? As I say, I haven't got anyone in mind for this, but I'm really pleased with how it's finished. And as I mentioned last time, I wasn't terribly pleased with my raglan Watsits, but I've now done a bit of studying to know what I need to do with those raglans in order for them not to be so holy. So in all, I'm really pleased with this little garment. The lovely rib stitch at the top there, and in the little lines here, breaking up those rib, that's where all your increases happen to expand the yoke. So you knit the yoke, and then you knit the whole body, and then of course you go back and knit the sleeves, and there it is on the other side. There's no German short rows or anything to make the back. I just noticed the back because that's where the join is. So that is the back of the sweater. And I am really pleased with this. The wool is quite nice. It's a mix of wool and a little bit of acrylic as well, which for a child's sweater makes it a bit more, a bit more endurable because it's probably easier to wash and all that sort of thing. So I'm really pleased with that. So all I need to find now is a little body, a little body that this can go on, and it still needs to be washed and all that sort of thing. So it's not 100% ready. But there we are, the anchor sweater. Now, I've really enjoyed this. It's been a lovely little project, and the thing about child-sized projects, of course, is that you get to the end of them, and you quicker get the boost, the serotonin boost, or whatever kind of scientific boost it is when you're fit. Is it dopamine? Serotonin? I can't remember. You get the boost anyway of finishing a little project. So there we are. Really pleased with that. And yeah, I mean, I would even be tempted to sort of knit more of these in probably some more sort of child-friendly colours. I mean, this is a sort of olive green, so a wee lad or a wee lass may well like this, but it's definitely more of a sort of autumn, wintry vibe. But, no one's wearing big, thick sweaters in the summer, are they? Anyway, I digress. It's a finished object, an actual finished object. And I'm sure that if I went to my mother and said, do you know a child that would fit a wee jumper like that? She would probably have a list of about 10 because she's a bit like that. But there we are. Now, that was the finished object. I have been able to do some work on my red cedar sweater. Let me get it for you. Here it is. It's in my no frills knitting bag, which I bought from Meg, my friend. And here it is. I managed to do a good bit on this yoke whilst I was on holiday. Let's see if we can get it sorted out. You can see how prepared I am for this sit-down video. It is a Sunday afternoon. I haven't long come back from leading our church service. And then usually what I do when I come back from that, I sit down, I have my lunch, and while I'm having my lunch, I then edit the video of me preaching a sermon, which goes onto YouTube, and then I've got time to myself. But there we go. I've been working on the red cedar sweater. There's little things all over the place and all that sort of stuff. It's hard for you to see when it's still on the needles and bunched up there, but that's the back of the sweater there with the German short rows, and you can see the colour work starting to take some nice form. I'm actually fairly close to the end of the colour work on this yoke now. I think there's a big, if you know what a sort of Fair Isle sort of rose looks like, I think that's what they call it. It's a sort of, this rose is green unusually. I'm just going with the colours that were on the pattern. I haven't been terribly adventurous. But that big green motif at the bottom is actually the last colour work motif of the jumper. I don't know if you can catch what that is there because of all the shade and all that sort of thing. But so that's the last bit of the colour work. The rest of the jumper, obviously you split for the sleeves and then you just do the body. Then you come back, pick up the sleeves and go. Then, I mean, beyond this colour work yoke, it's really quite simple. So I'm fairly sure that by the time I can just finish off that yoke, I can then crack on with that. Excuse me, bald head, dropped the wheel. By the time that yoke's finished, I'll be able to really crack on with the body of that and the arms, and it'll become a project that I can do, you know, when I don't have to stop and think about it. I can't remember if I told you last time, but I recently took that project to what we call knit and blether. Blether means chat or talk or whatever. And I was sitting there quite happily with the group, you know, chatting away as you do, and thinking I was doing my colour work wonderfully, excellently. And then I got to the end of one of the rounds and thought, oh, I don't quite have the right amount of stitches here where I can do this pattern. And then I looked back around the row of about 150 stitches and noticed that like 10 stitches in, I'd put a wrong colour. And I thought, well, this is too much to go back and do some Swiss darning. So I had to then unknit the colour work, you know, 130 odd stitches back to the beginning. Well, lesson learned. I mean, you know, I should really know better. But anyway, managed to pick up a few of those rounds when I was on holiday. We were on holiday in Argyll, which is just north of where we live here in the Isle of Iona. In the north of the island, there's a ferry that goes from one of our villages called Lochranza to a little hamlet called Clanaig on the Argyll Peninsula. And just an hour beyond that, we were in a little town called Oban, just outside Oban, where we spent a week in a caravan. We call it a caravan, but you guys might call it a trailer or something like that, in an absolutely beautiful spot. That was really our base for exploring lots of different places. And we really had a beautiful time. Although it's near to us here in the Isle of Iona, it's not a place that I'd explored a lot before, so it was really beautiful. So I've got loads of video, and some of it is even knitting related as well, because of course when you're on holiday and you're exploring new places, you have to go and visit the wool shops, don't you? But I've got some footage here of Easdale. I've got some footage of Kilmartin Glen, Donad, the island of Seal, and then up to Fort William for a lovely little wool shop up here. Now, that whole area that I've just mentioned, maybe with the exception of Fort William, is quite a significant area in Scottish history, because the Gaelic kingdom of Donad, where the kings came over from Ireland to sort of colonise these lands, eventually played host to likes of St. Columba, who set up his monastery on Iona. More on Iona later. But that whole area became the birthplace of what we now call modern day Scotland. So I'll try and talk to you about it as I show you some of this video. But here's an opportunity for you to go on a little bit of my holiday with me. I hope you enjoy this little segment. I do hope you enjoyed that little visit, and wasn't that just the most lovely little wool shop there in Fort William, Caledonia Wool Shop, I think it was called, in Fort William, which is a nice little town away up there and nestled under Ben Nevis, which is the UK's highest mountain. And it's such I really geeked out on being able to visit Argyll and Dunad. You know, it's just great to be able to visit that place, and it's so close to us. It's absolutely fantastic. So in terms of back to the knitting, because this is after all a knitting podcast, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of my future plans. Now, what I'm knitting away on here is I'm using the very same wool that I got spare to complete the Dustland sweater, which is not complete. And this is the same wool that I've just knitted that lovely little anchor sweater in. And I had some left, and I thought there's definitely a beanie's worth in there of what I had left. So I'm visiting a beanie because during the summer, I've been encouraging you to get involved in my Big Charity Beanie-Along. The main idea is that you're provided with a pattern, which is over on my coffee site for free. You don't have to pay for this at all. It's over on my coffee site because that's a place where you can go and download stuff. The pattern's there and the instructions are there. And for those of you who are in the UK and have been knitting beanies, at the end of August, beginning of September, you can start mailing me your beanies and I'll take them to a project where these beanies will really be usefully used for those who will need something on their heads come the winter months, perhaps those who are street homeless, perhaps even those who are in nursing care. And the last batch last year, I took over 300 beanies to a charity called Refugee, based in Glasgow. A Ouija is a Glaswegian, by the way. Refugee, and what they do is they welcome and supply support to the hundreds and thousands of refugees who land on these shores. So it's really great to be able to support those kind of charities and those kind of groups. So if you want to participate in the Big Charity Beanie-Along, the details are below. Now, you also remember me saying that come the autumn winter, I want to encourage you to explore another Scottish knitting pattern. Last year, beginning of last year, we did a focus on gansies, and we looked at various Scottish gansy patterns, and some of you made some spectacular stuff and posted it on Instagram for us all to see. Now, in this autumn and winter, I want to encourage you to explore Sanquhar knitting patterns. Sanquhar. I don't think I could spell that off the top of my head. I think I probably could. Sanquhar. Sanquhar. And Sanquhar is a little village down in Dumfries and Galloway in the southern part of Scotland, which has a long legacy of knitting. Kind of a sort of Fair Isle style in that it uses multiple colours and what's that word when you're talking about geometrical shapes, and little squares and triangles and checkerboard patterns and all sorts of things. And these patterns were typically used on things like, especially on gloves, and often the gloves on the collar, a bit like your Selby mittens would have all the different colours, but on the collar they would have the initials of the person, using all these different Sanquhar shapes. But you also get scarves and cowls and sweaters and cardigans and all sorts of things. Now, very soon, I hope to be drawing together, again, another little free download that will send you in the direction of lots of different resources for Sanquhar patterns. And what I'm encouraging you to do is let your creativity loose. If you find a pattern somewhere using those Sanquhar designs that you want to use and utilise, then you eat your heart out and you go for it. But for those of you who need a little bit more of a guidance, I'm hoping to draw up a little bit of a sampler in some sort of way and have that for download so that you can perhaps just knit that project, just to give you the experience of producing something in those Sanquhar patterns. It's so important that when you have all these knitting traditions, not only from Scotland, the UK, but worldwide, that there's I think as creatives that we invest something of ourselves to preserve some of these traditions, otherwise they'll be lost. There's some areas in the world where, of course, even knitting as a whole is being lost. There are a number of generations that don't have the same experience. And the wonderful thing is that, of course, in our day, knitting is having a little bit of a resurgence, such as the popularity of things like knitting and crochet podcasts. But we can never be sure that that's going to last. And so while we can, I think it's good to be able to invest some of our interest and skill in exploring some of these heritage projects and producing something for ourselves. So more about the Sanquhar KAL, possibly in the next episode, which I hope will be sometime in August. Now, I already mentioned in before the last segment, that as part of my holiday, I went to the Isle of Iona. And that was doubly wonderful for me. You may or you may not know that I have a master's degree in Celtic monasticism from the 5th to the 9th centuries. I know. But I'd never been to Iona, and Iona is a really significant location in Scotland and indeed of the UK and of Europe as far as Celtic monasticism is concerned. St. Columba arrived on the Isle of Iona in the 6th century with a boat full of 12 faithful disciples and set up a monastic community there. Now, by today's margins, Iona is a little tiny island on the edge of an island at the edge of Scotland. It seems really remote. But if you go back in the days where everyone travelled around these islands using boats, Iona was actually one of the prime spots on all the Atlantic sea lanes on the west coast of Scotland. It was a real centre of influence. It wasn't far from Dunad, where the kingdom was based, but there Columba established his monastic communities. Now, Columba is reported to be one of the most influential creators of Scotland, actually, because it was his work through evangelising the Scots and the Picts and the Britons in the southern part of Scotland, which then led to the creation of Scotland as we have it today. So he was a bit of a nation maker. But for me, it was just so wonderful to be able to go to Iona. It's the most beautiful place. I really hope you enjoy this footage. And then towards the end, I take you to the little shop which is owned by Iona Wool, who produce some of the most lovely things that you can imagine. So I hope you enjoy this little trip to Iona. Now, isn't that just such a lovely place? If you ever get a chance to go to Iona, you should grab it with both hands. It really is an astounding place. It really did help that the day that we went, the sun was shining on those white sands, which created all those beautiful shades in the water. It's just an absolutely ideal place. Now, as you may have been able to see from the video, we were blessed with the presence of many wonderful tourists from the United States of America who were absolutely delightful, but came with their own sense of volume. So I'm looking forward to going back to Iona, perhaps in the autumn or winter months, and enjoying the silence and maybe even the sort of ethereal nature of the place, and spending a little bit more time at that abbey. But whilst I was there, as I say, I did obviously go to the Iona wool shop. Wasn't it lovely? And it would have been entirely wrong of me to come home without some acquisitions from that shop. Now, when I went in, I didn't really know what they were going to have there. I've seen Iona wool before at the Scottish Yarn Producers Showcase, which was held in Perth not so long ago, but I'd never been on site, and so I didn't really go into the shop with an idea of what I was going to buy. But I was very aware that as soon as I walked into the shop, I was already inspired by the beautiful sands and sea and sunshine of Iona. So I picked up 300 grams of double knit in these three lovely colours, really because they reminded me of the beautiful shades of the sea, the sand and the blues and the greens and all the wonderful colours on the shore there. Now, of course, as a typical knitter, I didn't go and buy this with any particular project in mind. However, I am anticipating that this will turn it into some sort of colourwork something. That's my hope. And I hope that I'll be able to find or create a pattern which is perhaps quite specific to Iona. So I have no idea what that will eventually be, but that is definitely what I'm planning to do with this lovely wool. I mean, it's not the softest of wool. I think that they use wool from the island itself, and I actually read something that said they have 1,000 different breeds of sheep represented on Iona. I couldn't quite believe that. That's phenomenal. But the wool is taken, and I don't know what kind of wool this is. I don't think it says. It just says it's from Iona. It's possibly some sort of blend of all those sheep. It's not the softest of wool. So you wouldn't necessarily want to be wearing it around your neck or something. So some sort of something will be made from this, and I'm sure that when I actually get round to it, I will keep you up to date with what the plan is for that wool. But when I was there, I thought, well, my first visit to the wonderful Isle of Iona, I have to get myself something that is representative of the history of the place. And so I managed to pick up for myself this lovely Celtic cross. I have many of these kind of things. You can see one behind me there. But yeah, I couldn't go there and not bring back something which was reminiscent of its Christian past. So that'll find its way somewhere. I like to. Now, as far as other projects are concerned for the future, as well as whatever I do with this Iona wool, I'm still working on the Redland. I've also mentioned in the past that I am going to work on that blanket pattern, the midwinter blanket, and I'm definitely going to start that. It may even be that some of this gets used for the midwinter blanket, because we're getting to the season where it'd be nice to have some sort of project coming into the winter. And the wonderful thing about the midwinter blanket is it's all in squares, so you're knitting the squares one square at a time until you've got enough squares to add together to make the blanket. So that's definitely one of the things that's on my vision for the future. But in an entirely non-related, well, certainly non-related to knitting, I've actually had a little bit of a temptation to do some kind of quilting. Now, Kate at the Last Homely House has recently been doing what's called English paper piecing. And that's a kind of quilting where you get these little shaped pieces of paper, and then you cut your fabric and you sort of sew these loosely to these shaped pieces of paper, and then of course you do a proper perimeter stitch round to make the shape solid, whilst you're adding them to all these other geometric shapes. And I looked at that and thought, I really fancy that. I've always had a little sort of sense of, I would love to I'd love to make clothes. I'd love to make something for myself to wear. And when I saw that, I thought, well, that would be an ideal thing to start on. And what really got me thinking about that wasn't just Kate's videos and tutorial videos on English paper piecing, but when we were on holiday in the evenings in the caravan, we were watching on telly, or catching up with on telly, a programme called The Great British Sewing Bee, where all these contestants get together in a building, and they've got these challenges whereby they have to sew things, and so my sort of innate sort of temptation to sew stuff sort of came back to the forefront. So I might be branching out into that, and you may not be interested in that if that's not your thing, but there's every chance that if I do get there, it will appear on the channel at some point. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed that little exploration with me of some of my knitting progress, of my holiday in Argyll, my visit to the beautiful Isle of Iona, as well as news of some of the plans that are coming up. But now, as we come into finish, it wouldn't be an Albanach Knitter episode without your Gaelic phrase for the day. And it's a very simple one, and actually a very, very usable phrase that I'm going to give you today. And it's simply this: Cheery Andrasta. Cheery Andrasta, which simply means cheerio or goodbye for now. Cheery Andrasta. It's an informal way of saying, cheerio, ciao, see you later. Cheery Andrasta. When I was growing up, I didn't necessarily recognise the word cheery as having roots in the Gaelic, because my great aunts used to say cheery all the time, but it of course comes from the Gaelic. So cheery Andrasta means bye for now. So quite a useful phrase. But Bianach Giagut, Martian Lave, Andrasta. Cheery Andrasta. Take care. Goodbye. God bless.